everybody. I'm Jennifer Roig-Francolí. I am the Art of Freedom coach. And today I am just inspired to share something with you that came up in my own life right now that I think might be useful to you as a performer, as a musician. Just really briefly, I am a professional violinist, but mostly these days I am a coach specializing in coaching musicians online to help them overcome performance anxiety, physical pain, healing from injury, and excess tension, dealing with excess tension, physical and emotional stress, and lots of skills improvement, how to break through technique plateaus and really play with effortless ease and flow. So as a musician's coach, this is what I love to do and what I teach and talk about most of the time and think about all the time. So the topic for this video is something that just came up for me. And it's something that my students have been talking about recently. It's come up in my group class recently. And it has to do with a common phenomenon that if you're a performer, I'm sure you can relate to this, where you've had a performance and afterwards, whether it's the same night once you get home and you're alone at home, or just back into your everyday life at home, or the next day when you wake up, suddenly you feel kind of empty and there's a letdown. Whether the performance went well or was a disaster is kind of irrelevant. It can happen either way, but it can happen a lot to musicians who perform, that they prepare, they get excited, they're in the performance, and then after it's over, it's like, okay, now what? And there's a letdown. I'm calling it the post-performance letdown. And so my students have asked me many times, what can I do about this? And I'm sharing it right now because I just had a powerful insight for myself as I experienced this. I'm not performing as a musician very much these days. I just wrote a best-selling book for musicians, and so I'm doing a lot of podcast interviews. Now, the old Jennifer never would have done interviews. I was terrified of speaking in public, actually, and would refuse to do it through the first decades of my life. And it wasn't until I learned the Alexander technique and got over my fear of speaking in public that I started to do that and actually enjoy that. And I really do. Here I am going live on Facebook, and I enjoy it. I'm not terrified to do it. And I haven't planned this talk. I'm speaking off the cuff about an experience that I just had, which might be useful for you if you're a performer. I just did a podcast recording with Stephanie Bernards for Artistry with Heart, which is a podcast that I highly recommend. And it's beautiful, a beautiful topic, wellness for musicians. My episode will probably come out early in the new year, but we just finished recording it. And it was really fun speaking with Stephanie. We got into some really fun topics and deep topics about purpose and being a musician and my Art of Freedom method. I was not feeling nervous, but what was so interesting and what prompted me to come on now and talk about this is that once I shut off my video, my camera, and ended, and I left the Zoom recording, and I was on my own here back into my everyday life, I suddenly started to feel that familiar post-performance letdown that I used to have sometimes after performance. And I first really noticed and got curious about exploring as an Alexander technique teacher way back when I was using touch to teach my students, so using my hands in an Alexander lesson. I had so much fun teaching. I really enjoyed it all day. I'd be teaching student after student. And then at the end of the day, I'd be alone in the quiet in the studio and I'd feel this letdown. And it just really mystified me. That's when I first started thinking about it. If I had such a great day or great lessons and I really enjoyed it and I had fun, or if I was on stage and played really well and had a great time with my colleagues, why am I feeling down now? So I felt this now after this beautiful really lovely conversation for the podcast. She asked me, what do you do to be your authentic self and perform and share that with people? And so I was actually talking about my practice, what I do for myself as a performer, to be myself, to feel free, to enjoy expressing myself and sharing joy and love, my being with the world. And we were talking about how I do this and how I teach my students how to do this. So when we were finished, it was so fresh in my mind that, yes, of course, I noticed that I had this down energy happening all of a sudden. And I got curious, well, what is that about? Why am I feeling down, kind of feeling bad after I had such a lovely conversation? So what I'm always teaching my students is how to become more and more sensitive to the subtle changes in the nervous system, in the musculature, in our emotions, in our thoughts that are happening and changing from moment to moment to moment. It's happening to all of us all the time. We're constantly changing. But most of what's happening to us is subtle and goes completely missed. We are oblivious to most of the things that are going on inside of us, which is probably a good thing, or would be completely overwhelmed all the time because there's so much going on around us and inside us. We're reacting to things, we're responding to things, we're tightening, we're letting go, we're compressing, we're freeing up. We're doing that constantly. It's a constant flux, a constant vibration of being human. It's just natural. That's the way we are. But most of it is unrecognized and happens unconsciously. Most of our thoughts are unconscious, but every single thought is reflected by the body. So if it's an unhelpful thought, or maybe a self-doubting thought, or an anxiety-producing thought, a fearful thought, a worry, all those types of thoughts can cause the body to constrict. We go into what we call a startle response, a fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response. The body shuts down just a little bit to protect from potential danger. We do this all the time, and we don't even know we're doing it. So the Art of Freedom method is all-encompassing. It's about the whole self, mind, body, spirit, artistry, purpose, everything that you are, and getting curious about what you're doing to yourself in everyday life from moment to moment, with and without your musical instrument. And the practical process that I use most in the Art of Freedom method when I'm working with myself and with other people, my students, is based on the Alexander technique, but a special form, an evolution of the technique that goes back to the origins of touch-free teaching. It's called Primal Alexander, created by Mio Morales. And we start with this, pausing. And Alexander did this himself. He was an actor with a performance issue. He got hoarse on stage. And he realized that in order to solve his performance problem, because doctors, vocal specialists, speech therapists, they couldn't help him because there was nothing wrong with his voice. So he had to figure it out for himself. He experimented, observed himself, started recognizing that there were certain habits that he had of thinking to cause his body to compress, which caused the hoarseness to show up when he went on stage. So he had a very strong purpose. He had a desire to be an actor, and he wasn't about to give up just because the speech therapist couldn't help him. So he was determined, he had a strong desire, and then he got curious to find out what he was actually doing to himself that was actually sabotaging his performance. He was doing it to himself. He had to acknowledge that. And he had to take full responsibility for that because nobody else could see it. Nobody else was on the inside feeling and experiencing what he was experiencing. So he had to solve the problem, and he did. And he did that by experimenting, by observing himself, by getting to know his habits, and then trying out different ways of being, thinking, moving, and watching himself in mirrors to find out what he was doing and to stop doing that, to stop thinking in ways that was causing his system to compress. So back to what I experienced. After the podcast, I'd had a lovely time, as I said, and then I started feeling down. But because I have been practicing, I've been involved with the Alexander technique since 2003, so more than 20 years. And I've been teaching it since 2007. I have double certification in traditional hands-on Alexander technique. And I've been training in primal Alexander, hands-off, touch-free Alexander technique for nearly 9 years now. It's a long time. So I practice what I preach, and that means that I needed to pause for a moment and get curious, which I did. I was very curious about this phenomenon of feeling let down. Letting myself down is what I was doing. I was uplifted, open, sharing nice ideas, going in and out, a little anxiety here and there, a little uncertainty here and there, a little self-doubt here and there, but mostly I was just having a really good time in that performance of the podcast. So when I was done with that performance, well, I dropped what I was doing that was helping me. I stopped engaging in the performance of being myself and sharing myself in those positive ways. And this is what I discovered as a teacher of the hands-on technique when the student left the room. I realized that I was thinking differently when the student left. Now I started thinking differently when the podcast was over. I was not thinking in a helpful way. My thoughts were being reflected in my body and in my energy as letting me down. It was a letting down of the energy, and I started compressing, and it didn't feel good. When we do that to ourselves, it's a literal depression of the physical system, but also the emotional system, which is why we don't like that feeling very much. It's the literal psychophysical sensation. So thankfully, I know exactly what to do when that happens, when I'm aware of it. I paused. I noticed it happening. I noticed the direction I was going in immediately. And then I realized, oh, I just need to let go of that and do my constructive thinking. Then I could breathe. My body started freeing up. My emotions started uplifting. I went in a completely different direction, which was loving to myself first, but also, again, I was in that expressive mode of wanting to share that love and light and presence that I was doing in the podcast and that I stopped doing when the recording was over. So this is what I'm sharing with you as a musician that you can do especially if you plan for it in advance. And of course, you need to have the skills and the tools and to have that subtle sensitivity so you can nip it in the bud as soon as you notice it. I noticed this very, very soon after the recording was over. So I could shift it completely very quickly and get excited again. And that's why I'm making this podcast, because I'm back in that uplifting mode of being that's fun and exciting and joyful. I want my life to be like that whenever I can remember. And so it's going to be very interesting. When I stop this recording, I'm going to keep doing it as I go downstairs and I say hello to my son and I say hello to Mio and maybe go get dinner. I am going to continue getting curious about what's happening on a subtle level within me, aiming to let go of when I start thinking in a way that is depressing, compressing, startle, so that I can, again, just be present, be myself, be open, free. And that is the Art of Freedom method. So I do have a word, I have a term for the time after a performance. I call it the silver period. You may have heard me talk before about the golden period. I talk about that much more. And I devote a section of my book to the concept of the golden period. And there's so much to be said about what to do before an event, when you're backstage or the night before a performance. How do you deal with your thoughts, the doubt monsters, the performance anxiety that comes up? How do you manage that so that you can actually get yourself to the venue and enjoy the day of a performance, enjoy being backstage, enjoy walking on stage, and enjoy making music? It helps to have a system, an understanding, and practical tools that you practice before an event. And if you have a lot of performance anxiety, you need to know how to be working with that long before an event that's going to stress you out. And if you're an amateur, maybe that's just your weekly lesson with your teacher that stresses you out every time. I have students like that feel stressed about going to their lessons. Now, that's completely understandable, but it's also completely manageable when you understand what's going on, when you understand about the startle pattern, when you stop beating yourself up for how you feel, and you have practical tools to work on that with just a few minutes every day. I give my students what we call awareness etudes that I say, practice these twice a day just for a few minutes, but do it consistently. And you are changing the neurology of your brain. You're programming yourself to have this skill of managing your system. So if you start noticing, and again, it's about becoming more sensitive to subtle changes so you can nip it in the bud. As soon as you first notice the first symptoms of performance anxiety, that is when to apply the technique that I share. It's very, very, very simple, very easy to learn. My students learn how to do this on the first day of any program with me. They can shift and go in a different direction on day one, and I am not exaggerating. People can change the course of their pain, get out of their performance anxiety, build more confidence, and know that they're doing that already with the first step on day one. They can sense it. They can sense that change of energy, that change of direction. And they know exactly how they're doing it so they can repeat it. You need to think differently to get a different result in your emotions and in your body. So that's what I wanted to share with you today, because it was such an immediate experience in my own life to help myself with the silver period, which is what comes after performance. That's what I wanted to focus on today. You use the time before, the golden period, to practice the tools that are going to help you in the time after. Well, first of all, in the time during, so that you're actually having fun on stage and loving your music no matter what happens. No matter what anybody thinks, you can enjoy yourself. That's what I teach. First and foremost, it's about the present moment. It's about loving what you're doing, improving your skills, improving your technique, becoming confident and calm on stage and everywhere. So I hope this is useful for you. I hope this is giving you some food for thought. And if you would like to learn more, please get in touch with me. You can comment on this post. You can send me an email to jennifer@artoffreedom.me. You can check out my website at www.artoffreedom.me and just ask me about what it would look like to work with me and learn the Art of Freedom method. Right now, it is September 2024, and I have just a couple openings left in my premium private coaching studio for anybody who is ready to just really make a powerful transformation in your music making, maybe get out of pain, overcome performance anxiety, or dramatically improve your skills at a fundamental level with your whole self in a way that's enjoyable and not hard. It's not about practicing more. It's about getting really curious about practicing your primary instrument yourself. So if you're curious, get in touch now, and I would love to have a chat with you. Thanks for watching. And if you have questions about anything that I talked about today in this video, please let me know. And I love having conversations with anybody about this stuff. It is my passion. And as I finish this video, I'm going to take care of myself. Notice ease within me. And hopefully you're also noticing some ease and joy within you. And see if you can continue to be curious about that and experience that as you move on to your next activity. And I'm going to do the same thing as I say goodbye and move on to the next thing in my day. Sending you lots of love and light, and hopefully we'll be in touch soon. Take care. Bye-bye.